What you're looking at there is a 14-pound Packer brisket. It's going to be a beautiful piece of meat when done, but a few things need to be done to it before it can go on the smoker. First thing is getting rid of a lot of this fat. We don't need it on there. It's got enough fat inside of it that as it cooks slowly, it melts. It'll be a beautiful thing. You can leave it on, but you'll scrape it off when you're done cooking, and I much prefer to take it off before the cook versus afterwards. The next thing I'll do is really get it ready to separate the point from the flat. This down here is the flat part of the brisket. It's typically what most people have when they have sliced brisket, or what you see in the grocery store a lot of times. The second part of the muscle, kind of over here and on an angle, is the point. It's a lot fattier, and typically what you'll do after cooking a Packer brisket is separate the point from the flat, cube the point up, put a little sauce and some more rub on it, and throw it back on the smoker for a few hours, and you'll get what's called burnt ends. You may have seen that on a menu at a restaurant. It's my favorite part of the brisket, and I really can't wait for those to come out tomorrow. So I'm going to trim this thing up. I'll show you how much fat I save, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I've trimmed up the brisket, and when I bought it, the side that was on earlier was the fat side. Typically one side will be covered in fat and the other won't be. So this is the non-fat side. Here is pretty much all the fat I took off. Probably weighs a pound, pound and a half. Hey, you need to do it to make your brisket taste good. So the next thing I'm going to do is take some plain yellow mustard and put a little slather on top of the brisket. And basically what that's going to do is allow the rub to really stick on while cooking. You don't need a whole lot, just a thin layer. Make sure you get it everywhere. You want it not too heavy. It's not going to leave a mustardy flavor on the meat, but what it will do is help that rub stay on during the cook process. Some people say the vinegar in the mustard helps tenderize the meat. I don't know if I really buy that or not. Okay, so now it's time to apply the rub, and my rub here, nothing really top secret. It's mostly black pepper, salt, paprika, and a few other little seasonings, a little brown sugar, but not a whole lot. Mostly it's a very peppery, salty type of rub, which is what barbecue started off as back in who knows when, the 1800s or whatever, when folks down in Texas really started barbecuing. They didn't use a whole lot of different flavors and just a simple salt and pepper. So what I'm doing now is just really getting it all over the brisket, give it a nice good layer so that and it has a nice little barky flavor, which is that little burnt looking crust that ends up on some of the briskets and pulled pork, and it's really the most flavorful part of the meat, in my opinion. One of my favorite things to eat. So now that we've got this thing rubbed down and ready to go, I'm going to cover it with foil, put it in my refrigerator until tomorrow morning when I fire up the smoker. I'll cook it low and slow for about 2 to 3 hours, and then crank the temperature up on the smoker to about 275 to 300, which is considered high heat for smoking. And this 14-pound brisket should be done in about 8 hours. See you in the morning. Okay, well, it's time to fire up my drum smoker. If you want to learn how to build one, you can watch one of my other videos, or your best bet is to go to the Barbecue Brethren website. There's a great thread there that'll teach you everything you need to know. Inside, I've got my charcoal basket that holds about 12 to 13 pounds of charcoal. I can probably get 14 to 16 hours of burn time out of this thing at a low temperature. Buried in there, and you can kind of see it, is some wood. I'm using hickory and some cherry for the smoke. I like a real powerful flavor with the brisket. Something a little lighter, maybe with ribs and chicken. To fire this thing up, you can either use the charcoal chimney, or I've got a weed burner here that I just need to crank up. Love this thing. Just give the coals a little fire. for about 30 to 45 seconds, and sometimes you got to be careful that the fire doesn't go out. But after about 30 to 45 seconds of torching the coals, I'll put the lid on, and I should get up to my temperature, within about 20 minutes. Alright, time to put the brisket on the smoker. It's looking nice and good there, ready to go. I'm at about 250, 255 degrees, which is a little higher than I want, so I just shut down one of the air intakes. But when I put 13 pounds of meat on there, that'll absorb some of the heat. I'd say probably in a half hour or so, I'll be down to the 2 1/4 range, which is where I'm going to start. And then I'll bump it up to about 275, 285 to finish. So I'm going to put it on the smoker. You can see the beautiful smoke coming out. And once I put it on there, I'm going to leave it alone for a few hours without taking a look at it. And we'll check back in and see what happens. Alright, the brisket's done. Looks pretty tasty, doesn't it? A lot of people want to know what temperature inside the meat it should be when a brisket is done. And there's no real guideline, typically anywhere between maybe 185 and 150 degrees. But the most important thing is that a probe thermometer or a fork even goes into the brisket as easy as a warm knife would go through butter. When there's no resistance, you know you're in good shape. So what I'm going to do now is take the brisket, wrap it up, and put it inside a cooler here. And I've got some old newspaper and a moving blanket. And what that'll do is keep it warm, let it rest so the juices don't come running out, and it'll continue to cook just a little bit and tenderize even more. I'll probably let this thing sit for about an hour and a half, and then we'll slice it. Okay, so the meat's rested about an hour, hour and a half, and I'm getting ready to slice it. Important thing to do is make sure you slice it against the grain. If you slice with the grain, you're going to end up with shoe leather. It's not going to be good to eat. Right here, I cut a little corner off against the grain before I started cooking so I would know which direction to go. One important thing about the resting, as you can see, there's a little juice on the cutting board. This is all that was inside the foil after resting for an hour and a half. And that's important to know because all the juice that was inside the meat is still inside the meat. It didn't come out. Had I cut right into it after pulling it off the smoker, I would have lost a ton of juice and it would not be nearly as juicy as it's going to be. So I'm going to slice it up and I'll be back with you in a few minutes. Alright, I've gone ahead and sliced the brisket, and as you can see, looks pretty darn good. Nice little bark right there on that piece. And the purple hue that you see going along all the tops or bottoms of the pieces is the smoke ring. It's the reaction of the smoke and the nitrates and stuff that are in the meat. Nice little smoke ring there. A lot of good flavor. Not too smoky, but enough that you know that this thing was done in a smoker versus an oven. I did talk about two different parts of the brisket, the point and the flat. This is the sliced flat. And here I had removed the point, and it kind of laid on top of the flat, but there is a little fatter end on there. So what I'm going to do is clean a little bit of the fat off of this, cut it into chunks, toss it with a little rub and barbecue sauce, put it back on the smoker for a few more hours, make burnt ends. Wonderful thing. That is it. That's how you do a brisket on the drum smoker. Hope you enjoyed, and go out and make one. It's not that hard.